Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Foster. I am Inc. Magazine's editor-at-large. Welcome to the first installment of a new series we're calling Inc.'s Real Talk, Business Reboot. Today's installment is an AMA with Mark Cuban. That's AMA for Ask Mark Anything. Mark needs no introduction, but that's what I'm supposed to do in this kind of thing. So I'll say that, Mark is a serial entrepreneur. Mark is a star of Shark Tank. Mark is, of course, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, and he's an investor in hundreds of companies across a very wide array of industries. Since we announced this event, we have received a tremendous response. We've received thousands, literally thousands of questions in advance of the event. We're also going to be taking questions in real time as we go. We have a moderator in the background who is going to be selecting the most pressing questions. So while we have thousands of them, we probably won't get to every single question today, but I am confident we're going to cover a very broad array of topics that are going to be specifically relevant and useful to everybody who's joined us today. So thanks for being here. Let's get right to the questions. Mark, welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Here I am. Thanks for having me, Tom.
There you are. Thanks for being here. Before we jump into the attendee questions, I want to ask one question from me. You were recently became a member of the President's Advisory Council for Opening the Country Back Up, and that was really on my mind as I read through so many of the questions that we received from attendees. I want to read one thread of questions that recurred a lot.
Sure.
I want to read a few of them from this thread. One was, when do you see the economic fallout ending? Another, when do you think this will all be over? A number of questions. This last one is an example of many questions, and it's tragic that came in like this, that said, when do you know as a business owner that it's time to throw in the towel? Which I think, just underscores how urgently people want help and want to see a way forward. So my question for you is what is one message, what is the one message that you, as a member of the Advisory Council, want to make sure the administration hears about this process of trying to open back up?
Number one, it's hard to be a small, medium-sized business right now because number two, it's complete uncertainty. Nobody knows for sure when it's going to end. And so we've got to be cognizant of what it's going to take to help small businesses get back open. But number three, and most importantly, while we're going through a reset effectively right now, businesses are closing down, people can't leave their homes, it's hard for them even to spend the stimulus money or the money they have. But we'll get to the other side of this. Once we start to open back up, it won't be business as usual. It won't be, the way it was. It'll be America 2.0. And that's the greatest opportunity ever for entrepreneurs. If you're agile, if you're resilient, if you can fight your way through all this disastrous hell, which is the only way to describe it, then you're going to see what it's like as we start to go in new directions, and that'll create new opportunities. I can't tell you exactly what they're going to be, but within your own industry, within your own customer base, you'll be able to see where the opportunities are, and those companies who adapt are going to do really, really well, and those companies who are set in their ways are going to struggle.
Great. Well, so let me ask you, obviously we got a lot of questions, as I just alluded to, about when people can expect things to open back up. Let me ask you one question. This came in from Andrea Pointer, who is the owner of a manufacturing company. Andrea asks, do you believe the economy has a chance of rebounding this year?
No, unfortunately. I think it's not going to be V-shaped. It's going to be more U-shaped with some ups and downs, just because people are going to adapt. If you have a manufacturing company, you're going to have to figure out what your customer base wants and needs, and whether or not what you've been manufacturing is still going to work. You have to figure out, how your companies are going, how your employees are going to adjust to coming back to work. So there's going to be things that you need to put into place to make them feel safe, to make your customers feel safe in doing business with you, depending on what the product is, obviously. So there's going to be a lot of adjustments. People are going to introduce technology in places they hadn't before. People are where there were touch points before, maybe there'll be ambient voice, Google Home, Alexa type things going on. There'll be a lot of changes. And so whether you're a manufacturer, a restaurant, a clothing store, whatever it is, you're going to have to adapt. And I don't think it's just going to be business as usual And if your business was great on January 15th, it's going to be great 15 days after we open up. You're going to have to be agile and you're going to have to adjust.
I want to get into a whole bunch of specifics about some of the things you brought up there, and we have so many questions getting into those things. Let me ask you a few very specific questions from attendees about their businesses, and I think that their experiences and their worries are probably transferable to many others. This one actually is a little bit about you. Before we get into that, Patty Stobaugh asks, were you prepared in your business or businesses for this disaster financially? And if so, was that intentional?
No, I wasn't prepared. I had no idea. If I was, the NBA wouldn't be shut down and suspended right now. I wouldn't have a lot of different businesses that are struggling. Now, I've been fortunate. There are some businesses that's, some of my Shark Tank companies that sold food into grocery stores, or food for delivery to home have done well, but a lot of them are struggling and going through a lot of hard decisions. And I'm trying to encourage them, as I said earlier, just to be agile. The marching orders that I've given the companies I've involved in are, number one, communicate. Communicate with your employees, communicate with your customers, communicate with any and all stakeholders. And number two, be honest, because you can't bluff anybody. Everybody knows it's a mess right now. And so by being honest, people will respect you. By being authentic, people will know that you're in this together with them. And number three, be as completely transparent as you possibly can. Again, everybody's afraid. It's okay to say you're afraid. It's okay to say, there's uncertainty, because as we start to get on the other side, however we open up, then you'll have already developed an honest relationship with your customers and prospects. And I think they'll respect you and appreciate it more. They may, there's nothing really to sell right now unless you're selling to companies that are doing really well. So I would really focus on communicating and being ready for whatever comes when we get on the other side.
Great. All right, so let me ask you the first of these very specific questions from attendees. Kathleen Swinson, who is the president of a construction company, says, I am now spending my personal money to keep my company open. How do I know when it's time to call it and close my company?
That's a hard question. The first thing I would do is talk to your suppliers, your vendors, your employees, and just tell them, look, this is the conversation I'm having with myself. I'm not sure what I need to do right now. So I want to get feedback from each and every one of you. And I would do that simply because you don't want to surprise them and have it come out of left field when in a period when it may be hard for them to get a job. But number two, and this is the most important part, they may have a great idea. I can try to guess, not really knowing your construction company or the market you're in or what's going on there. But your employees in particular know. They know you. They know the industry. They know your business. And all it takes is one good idea. And I'm a big believer that when we come out of this reset and we get into America 2.0, there's going to be some small companies that just blossom because they had a different vision. They said, you know what, the way we did things before the pandemic, they were okay, but here's an idea I have. Here's a vision I have to do them better. And maybe one of your employees has an idea for, a construction company 2.0. It's just a better way to do it. So rather than just feel, because I know it's stressful, right? I know that pain inside of you when you're going through a business and you're like, oh my goodness, right? I have all these people depending on me. I have all these goals. I have all these dreams. I have X amount of money in the bank. And if I don't make the right decision, it could all be gone. I know that pain. Right? But before just saying, you know what, I'm not going to do it anymore. I can't deal with the stress. I don't think the opportunity is there. Before you do that, talk to all the people that you're connected to. Get feedback and just say, you know what, do you have a better way? Is there something we can discuss? Do you have a vision? Because all it takes is one. You don't have to have a ton of great ideas. You just have to have one thing that changes how you approach things that's better than it was before. And again, there's going to be companies that come out better because of those ideas.
This is a similar question in the sense that it's somebody who comes from the construction industry. Denise Cusimano says, business has completely died. Her business has completely died since March 18th. I'm still advertising on Google and Angie's List and Facebook. am I wasting my money? I think there's a very interesting question there, right?
Yeah.
Business is in a trough, but
Right.
should you still be putting your name out there? Should we be marketing?
So the first question is, can you sell anything right now? Right. And so if you can, yes, because one of the interesting things is that advertising has dried up so dramatically that the cost of for pay-per-click, the cost for customer acquisition has basically fallen. So if you are selling things right now, it's a great time to advertise. One of my companies, Dude Wipes, is a Shark Tank company. And because of the shortage in toilet paper, people, particularly guys, are looking for alternatives. And so their sales have gone up significantly, and they continue to advertise, and it's working for them because they're getting new customers who are becoming acclimated and committed to their brand and their products. So if you have a product now, yes. If you have a longer term sale product, right, where it's a service or it just takes you longer to close the deal, and you see in your industry that maybe some of your competitors aren't as strong and have fallen back or reduced their advertising, and using online, you can reach more people, then yes, advertise. Build that base now, because those companies that are advertising now are going to look stronger. Oh, wow, there's an ad from ABC company. You know, things must be going okay for them. What's going on with them? And then when you're calling to communicate with those prospects and customers, you know, they're going to say, I saw you. And then another component of that, there's advertising, and then there's marketing. There's upgrading your website. There's upgrading your social media presence. There's doing new content. You know, every small business over the course of time, you get all caught up and you're super busy. You barely have enough time to sleep, and you think to yourself, boy, if I only had 10 minutes, I would redo this. I would change that. I would restructure my supply chain. I would create these videos. Well, now's your time. And so, you know, the balance is going to be, do you advertise now or invest that in marketing materials or invest that in content? All these things you'll just have to balance out and see where you'll get your greatest return.
Yep, yep. Here's another very specific question, and I bet something that a lot of people are thinking about. This is an owner of a food and beverage company, a restaurant. Says, the last 5-year option to renew my lease is due soon. Am I crazy to ask for a reduction of 25% for the next 2 years of the 5-year term remaining?
Yes, you're crazy. You should ask for more. Yeah, seriously. I mean, depends on, you know, where you're at, what's happening around you. Look at the businesses that are to both sides of you. Do you think they'll be back? What's the challenges that they'll have? You know, are you going to have to make changes to your business? You know, one of the things that's going to be the biggest challenge, you know, for a restaurant in particular, how are you going to deal with not just social distancing, but your restrooms? Are you going to have to redo your restrooms? You know, are there new things? Are you going to have to deal with changes in your HVAC or air conditioning and improve the filtering? Are you going to, you know, someone comes in wearing a mask, and, you know, you're not quite sure about them, and then they sneeze and leave the mask on one of the tables. You know, just nasty stuff like that. Do you need hazmat materials? You know, how are you going to dispose of that? There's a lot of things that in order to get open, you need to consider. Or maybe your to-go business is just killing it. I've talked to some restaurants where they're not killing it, right, but they're doing so much more to-go business that's more profitable for them. They're thinking about expanding that and reducing the amount of space they have for in-restaurant. And so you have to make that decision based off of your experiences. Because the one thing I'm fairly certain of is that for any retail-facing or retail-touching company or establishment, your costs are going to go up, even though your demand is probably going to go down. You know, again, I use this example now all the time. If you have a shop that sells clothing, in the past, someone comes in, tries it on, feels the materials. That's no big deal, right? You put it back on the shelf, or you put it back on a hanger, and everybody's happy. Now, if somebody tries on a T-shirt and they decide not to buy it, what do? Or do you not let them try on the T-shirt? Or do you have it wrapped? Or do you sanitize? There's so many things that go into the decision of opening back up and going forward. You know, again, like as I mentioned earlier, once we get through this reset, every entrepreneur, every company owner is going to have to be agile and ask themselves, okay, in this new America 2.0, how would I redesign my business? What would I change? And how can I change it to make it more profitable, even if it's something that's new to me and new to my customers?
Yep, yep. Let me ask you another one. This is from Brent Zur, who is the CEO of an engineering company. Brent says, we are owed past due invoices. It would help, I would help them and extend payment if possible, but how do we ask for payment and not look insensitive?
You just do what you just did. You know, I had one of my companies email me yesterday, and they were all freaked out because they had been changing some of their accounting systems and going to some processing programs, and that didn't work well with all the change that happened, and they were overdoing a $50,000 invoice, and that company was just banging on them, demanding and screaming and yelling, because obviously that company was desperate as well. That wasn't the right way to handle it. That didn't leave a good taste in people's mouths. I would just do what you just did. I would email them and say, hey, I understand times are rough. This, you know, this invoice is overdue, and we understand that. How can we work together to allow you to pay this in a way that works for you? And just see what they say. And realize that for every invoice that you're owed, there's somebody on the other side of that invoice freaking out because they know they owe it. It's not like they forgot about it, didn't realize it was there. They know it. They don't, you know, and then part two to that is, you know, you always need to understand your customers' businesses, right? As a service company, as an engineering service company, they hired you to accomplish some goal, some mission, right? And you understand what that is, and you see how that company's business is faring right now. And you also have an idea somewhere along the line of what you think they'll be able to do in the future as things change. And so knowing that, you know, again, talk to them, Zoom them, call them, email them, whatever it may be, with that understanding of what position they're in, and just say, how can we work together?
Yep. Two more quick questions along these same lines, and then let's move to another thread. One is, this is from Susie Holtquist, who runs she's the CEO of an advertising and marketing company. She says, if we are dropping prices to get customers and cash in the door now, do you think that's permanently going to lower prices that we can charge in the future?
If they went, I missed the first part, Tom.
If we are lowering prices now to get customers and cash in the door, is that going to
is that going to screw up your pricing? Yeah, it's going
in the long run
screw up your pricing. Probably. You don't know, but probably not. I think, you know, when there's little demand, I mean, you're reducing your prices for a reason, and your customers know that. It's like we talked about the lease or a little bit earlier, or read a little bit earlier. Do you renegotiate down? And the answer was yes, more than you probably expected. And I think it's the same thing here. Like any service business, whether you're in an advertising agency, an engineering service company, you know, your value proposition to your customer is going to change based off of how that customer's business is doing. So right now, your prices may come down. But as your customers' businesses improve, that's when you'll be able to raise them. If they don't improve for a while, and you're a high quality, lower cost operator or service provider, then you're probably going to keep them, and that means a lot as well. So I would be more concerned about continuity than future pricing.
Okay, great. So we got a number of questions about sales, about the sales process, and let me just read you one of them. This comes from Marcy Schmidt, who is in insurance sales. Marcy asks, what are some other ways that our advisors can network with new prospects when they used to meet for a drink or play a round of golf?
Still meet for a drink. Have one of those virtual Zoom happy hours. Why not? I mean, depending on how much margin you have in your sale, it's not inconceivable to, you know, order from a liquor store and have, you know, a little bottle of wine dropped off at all your different prospects and have a virtual Zoom happy hour. Actually, I just thought of that. That's a really good idea. I'm gonna start telling some of my companies to do that. You know, just be innovative and supportive like that. You know, selling insurance is a huge touch business, right? You have to build confidence. You have to have people trust in you, and understanding the circumstances your clients are in, the best way, and your prospects, you know, have that virtual Zoom happy hour. It's going to probably cost you less money than it would have in the past, and really create a better connection. The other thing is, for most companies, unless you've got something that people need right now, you're selling dude wipes, right? You're selling Alyssa's cookies, things that people eat and are buying at the grocery stores, and the grocers are asking for more and more, right? Those are kind of the exception, not the rule. But for everything else, where everything's slowed down and your customer's not really set to buy yet, don't sell. Just be a friend. Just communicate. Again, everybody is freaked out about this. Me, my family, you, your family, because no one knows really anything. We have imperfect information. And when you're like that, when you're in circumstances like that, even in a business relationship, just saying hi, just being nice, just goes so far, because those are the people we'll remember when it comes time to start doing business again. So send them an email. Hey, how you doing? How's the fam? You know, hey, what's going on? What music you listening to? What shows you watching on Netflix? You know, a book reading club. Here's the book I love. You want me to send you a copy? You know, here's the show I'm watching. We're having this little, like, I'm Zooming with my high school buddies. I'm Zooming with, you know, college buddies, all these different groups, like what we're doing right now. And I like it. And, you know, it's easier than in the past. And so trying to use those types of opportunities to connect with single customers, multiple customers, whatever, that's a good thing. And then one last thing is where you have somebody available to you that has expertise that you think may be of value in going forward. Whether it's insurance, here's what's happening in an insurance low interest rate environment. Here's what's happening in healthcare. If you sell, Medicare Advantage programs, here's what's changed, and you're looking at new Medicare Advantage programs because this happened or that happened. It's cool just to have what, like we're doing here, your own little Zoom presentation to your clients that have, senior management or you or an expert talking about what's going on in the marketplace.
Yep, that's great. We got so many questions of, I think what you were just talking about is very relevant to people. There were many questions, people saying, I'm nervous about making sales calls. And so I think you're really speaking to that. Also, by the way, your idea about the virtual happy hours and what you're talking about was a big hit. We just had a huge string of people saying, great idea, Mark, great idea, Mark. So you got something there, go with that. I want to talk a little bit about one of your biggest businesses, the Mavs. A lot of people are curious about not just basketball, but businesses where, lots of people gather, whether it's conferences, whether it's
Sure.
sports, whether you have an event venue. Let me pick one of these questions. Here's one. Fritz Owen asks, do you remain optimistic that we will gather again for live events in large arenas and outdoor venues within the next 12 months?
Yes, absolutely, positively. Look, I'm a big believer in science. I'm a big believer in American exceptionalism. I'm 100% confident that the scientists and the doctors will figure this out. No doubt in my mind. I think we'll have therapies. I think we'll have prophylactics, things that keep you from catching things, and a vaccine as well to help keep you from catching things. And so I'm not worried about that. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Are you in favor of the NBA continuing the season without fans in the arena?
Oh yeah, I have no problem with that. Look, I think we need sports. We need something to root for right now. We need something to yell about and scream about, and virtually together watching a game. I mean, if you're a Mavs fan and Mavs are playing the Lakers, and you're a Lakers fan, and all your Lakers fans are screaming with each other, and all the Mavs fans are screaming with each other, and the Lakers fans are upset because the Mavs just kicked their butts. Those are the types of things we need just to get excited, whether it's basketball or any sport. We need something to gather around. So yeah, we'll play without fans if that's the way it works. But the one thing we won't do is jeopardize the health of our employees, whether they're players, coaches, or any important personnel needed to produce a game.
One of the biggest subject areas of the questions that we've received is around the federal loan programs, the PPP, yeah, no obviously, the EIDL program from the SBA. Let me read one or two of these questions to you. One of the big issues, obviously, over the last week, one of the huge areas of discussion has been larger corporations taking some of those PPP funds. Michelle Pusateri asks, she works in the food and beverage industry, asks, how do we ensure that the next round of PPP is distributed fairly to the companies that are most impacted by this current situation?
You're not going to like my answer, and I don't like my answer. You don't, right? You can't. And the reason why the structure of the PPP program is that it's approved through banks. So in order to make sure that the most needy companies get it, number one, you'd have to pull all the applications from all the banks into a single location. And number two, you'd have to come up with criteria in order to, as objectively as you can, get it to the right people. But how do you decide who the right people are? Is it the lowest cost per employee, which encourages people to pay lower wages? Or is it, the most number of jobs? Or who knows what that criteria is going to be? So what I suggested to the council, and they turned it down, was I suggested it should be a lottery, a random drawing, where whenever you apply for whatever bank, you get a number assigned, it goes to the feds. They then say, okay, for the next, we're going to pick the first 50,000 recipients, and then we'll see what the total is, and those people get it. Now, part and parcel of that is I also thought that we should put a cap and eliminate any public corporations, so that public companies who have publicly traded stocks or even publicly traded bonds, they have other opportunities to raise capital. They can do a secondary offering, they can do pipes, they can do warrants, they can do options. There's buyers there. The stock market, there's liquidity there that's not available to private companies. So those companies should have been excluded. And there probably should be an asset cap where if you have liquid assets above X number of dollars, you're just not eligible.
Yeah.
It's easy for me to second guess and to say all these things. And I told them going in, and I understand why it was too late to change some of these things. And the reason why, you can't really get mad at them is because they were trying to rush this through, because the biggest enemy all small businesses have right now is time. They trying to get the money in as many hands as possible, as quickly as they could. And when you do that, you're going to make mistakes. And so as frustrating and heartbreaking in a lot of respects as it is, it's understandable as well, because when you try to rush, when it's ready, fire, aim, instead of ready, aim, fire, things go wrong.
So here's a sort of a subsidiary question to that. This comes from John Petz, who works in the entertainment industry. John asks, what are your strategies or tips to form a solid relationship with your business banker? Obviously relevant to this discussion.
Yeah. This was counterintuitive to me, and I wouldn't do it for the longest time when I had my first couple companies, because I hate debt. But you got to borrow money. That's it in a nutshell. Donald Trump said it best. When he was going broke, the first couple times, it was like the more money he owed, the better shape he was, because the banks had to deal with him. And I think that's what paid off here. And so even if you don't need the money, once we start to get back to some level of normalcy, it's not a bad idea to go and borrow a little bit of money just to develop that relationship, so they have all your credit terms and you demonstrate that you're able to pay it back. It's just like getting a good credit score. I mean, I remember the days when my credit cards were getting cut up. And so it took me a long time to reset my credit score. And I had to use my credit cards and work on paying them back. And this is the same situation.
Yeah. People have a lot of questions about other sources of funding, of course, as well.
Right.
One of the questions, Elizabeth Alonso Villarreal asked, she works in the real estate industry, asks, with money being tight right now, how can we approach potential funders?
Carefully. You've got to really have a plan in place to make it worthwhile. I'm getting business plans, and in terms of investing in those companies, I'm looking to see what for America 2.0, once we get out of this, what's an idea that makes me think, why didn't I think of that? I'll give you an example. Somebody sent me a thing today for new types of sinks that have UV rays in it and deal with protecting against viruses that may come off of somebody's hand. A regular sink doesn't do that. I didn't know that. There's things that come back up through pipes. I didn't know that. And so this is something that's going to be a significant value potentially if they're able to pull it off, that I didn't even consider. So if you have a business like that, you'll probably be okay. If it's, a blocking and tackling traditional business, you're probably going to have to turn to sweat equity. It's just going to be, it's just going to be the grind, because it's going to be harder. And be careful in terms of using your credit cards and overextending yourself, thinking it's just going to be the way it always was. Try to be as resilient as you can, but don't go all in unless you're certain.
Related question from Tracy Daly. Is Shark Tank coming back in September?
Yes, of course. And actually they just, I'm not allowed to say that, but actually we're on Friday nights on ABC, and we've got a bunch of new episodes coming as well.
Great. A lot of people had questions about workplaces and work styles, which obviously have changed radically for everybody in the last month or more. Alex Zimmerman asks, how do you see the future of office space to how it is currently, or presumably how it was before this all changed?
I think it's going to change. I think it's got to change. I'm reading this book I just started this morning called Healthy Buildings, where they start to talk about, you know, the type of office environment in particular that you work in. It's not just about whether it's green and zero footprint any longer. It's how do you recirculate air? How do you create an environment that you want to, that you feel safe and comfortable and productive in? And it's going to be different for a while. And so all of us have had experience now, obviously, with what we're doing here when using conferences like this, and it works, you know? And so as a business owner, as a CEO, as a manager, just ask yourself, are you going to incorporate this more? Is there a way that you become more cost effective, more productive using video conferencing? And if the answer is yes, you know the answer then to what other people are going to do. You know, I don't think big businesses that are in big office buildings, if they cut 30, 40% from working at those office buildings, it wouldn't surprise me at all. And as somebody who already worked from home, you know, the benefit of being there when my kids get home, and if you have young kids, you know, the benefit of being there when childcare sometimes is hard is a huge plus. And you've also learned, you know, you don't, 8 days in an office, I'm sorry, 8 hours in an office is probably as productive in most cases as 3 hours at home because of all the random stuff that you do. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of changes in how we work. I think there's going to be a lot of changes on how real estate is configured, how offices are configured. I mean, think of that conference room in your building, right, or on your floor. The first time, if you have to go back to business as usual, the first time you have that big meeting in that conference room, nobody wants to be the first one and nobody wants to be the last one in there. And so there's going to be all kinds of changes. And, you know, again, talk to your employees. What do they like? What works for them? And you may find that you can save a lot of money having them work at home and they like it more. And if they don't, then you'll adjust accordingly.
Yeah. A lot of people are interested in how you, Mark Cuban, are managing, you know, your work and life in this moment. Let me ask you a couple of the questions. There have been many
Sure.
along these lines that have come in. One is, what's your best advice? This comes from Paul Gilario, who works in telecom. Paul asks, what's your best advice to increase one's productivity in a day?
So I'll tell you exactly what I've done for the last 20 years. I don't do meetings or phone calls. I'll do a meeting if you're going to write me a check. I'll do a meeting if there's like a really good reason to help close the deal, or it's some charity or something I just don't have a choice, right? But other than that, it's email. I mean, I try to save the time on, you know, in the old school conference room like we're just talking about, you know, the first thing is what's to eat, who got the donuts, what kind of donuts do we have, standing around, how are the kids, milling around, okay, who's going to start the meeting? Everybody gets their pleasantries out of the way. That was just unproductive time to me. Same with the phone call. How are the kids? You know, what'd you think about the game last night? Unproductive time. I really tried to drive everything to email for a couple reasons. One, I can do it any time of the night. Two, it gives me a tickler file of all the things that I'm doing. And so what's undone are my unreads. And I try to keep those to under 30 unreads at any given point in time. And three, I get to search it. So if you and I had, if somebody out there emailed me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I probably still have it. And, you know, I can go back and it's like, oh yeah, there's Tom. And I wonder what we talked about. He said, I emailed you before. I'll go look it up and I'll figure out what we talked about. So that makes me even more productive. And so I think in a work at home environment, since everybody's using email in the cloud, I think, you know, I'll continue to do it the way I do it. And I try to encourage people to do it the same way. With the one caveat, be careful for hacks. You know, don't open up or don't click on a file from somebody you don't know. It's a little bit harder to be protected when you're at home, but you got to be more vigilant.
This is a slightly, I love this question. This is kind of a little bit of a wild card question. This comes from Robert Reynolds, who is the CEO of a real estate company. You know, we all have a lot of, in some ways, extra time right now. As you said, sometimes we can be a lot more productive, you know, at home. Robert says, if you could study anything for the next 12 months, 5 hours per day, what would you study?
I'll tell you exactly what I do study, Robert. Great question. So here are the big trends. Where I make my money is trying to stay one step ahead. And how I stay one step ahead is I'm a reading machine. I read for hours every day. It might be books. It might be online. It might be courseware. It might be any number of different things. So here are the things that I'm trying to pay attention to. And actually, there's 4 now. I mentioned one, healthy buildings. That's a brand new one I just started this morning, because when I heard about it, it made perfect sense. Your work environment in a pandemic induced world is going to be different. And I don't know all the issues that need to be addressed to make a work environment healthy, whether it's a restaurant or a big building. And so I started reading up about healthy buildings, and not just the environmental aspect or the green aspects in terms of, reducing energy consumption, but health in general. So that's number one. Number two is robotics. When we come out of this into America 2.0, we've learned a hard lesson that we need to manufacture more things here in this country. In America 1.0, manufacturing 1.0, the idea of manufacturing was, you tooled and dyed some things, you made things, but then you put them on an assembly line, and there were people on the assembly line adding little pieces, making pieces until you got a finished product. And it was hard for us to compete because our labor was a lot more expensive, and there were a lot more environmental rules and other overhead associated here in the United States than there were in places like in Asia and the rest of the world. And so we were at a competitive pricing disadvantage. Robotics overcomes that. And so by investing in robotics as a nation, right, I'm a big believer that whatever we spend for infrastructure in America 2.0, a big chunk of that should be to introduce robotics and invest in research and development, and even subsidizing robots for business. Because if we're able to take let's just say there's 1 billion products manufactured outside the United States that we import and buy here in the United States. 1 billion of them, I don't know the exact number. If we brought over 500 million of those products and just had robots manufacture them, all the ancillary employment required for maintaining, programming, supporting, cleaning those robots, the real estate, the HVAC, there's so many things in that ecology, right, of robotics. The aggregate employment would be dramatically higher. And even what we call unskilled workers, people who maybe don't have a high school diploma or just a high school diploma, there will still be plenty of jobs for them, paying more and more of them than you would have seen trying to bring traditional manufacturing back. So I think investing in robotics as a country is important. And then finally, at the top of the list is artificial. I left out one. So before I get to artificial intelligence, precision medicine. Like, if we've learned anything from COVID, it's that it impacts everybody differently. And one of the reasons is our bodies are basically this one big math equation, and the variables for each of us are different. And with precision medicine, we're starting to do things that custom tailor medicines to each individual. So you might read about therapies for breast cancer, and if you have certain genes, you can have certain therapies that work specifically for your body type. So that's another thing that I've been trying to get up to speed on. But at the very top of the list is artificial intelligence. I've been through the PC revolution, the networking revolution, the internet revolution, mobile computing revolution, cloud computing revolution, and AI blows them all away. It's not even close. For small business owners, you've got to understand it. And I know it doesn't sound easy, but if you went back 25 years to the early days of the internet, when you talked about people having to download a TCP/IP client and work on a dial-up modem to try to get your Netscape browser to work, people were as confused as hell. And when you tried to think about setting up a server or doing HTML or JavaScript, that was like rocket science back then. Now, everybody has a basic understanding of getting online and everything that we can do. Artificial intelligence is the same way, only have a greater impact. And so in terms of your decision-making as a business, going back to work, making pricing decisions, there's so many ways that AI can impact your business. I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend that you go online, go to Coursera and take an introduction to AI, go to YouTube and look at introduction to artificial intelligence videos. Those are the types of things you need to have a basic understanding of. China and Russia both say whoever dominates artificial intelligence will dominate the world over the next 25 years. And they're right. And it applies to business as well. And unfortunately, we're not, as a country, investing enough. We're starting to increase it, but it's dominated right now by the biggest companies. And so, for my small businesses, I worry more about our ability to introduce AI and do it right than I do about the long-term effects of the COVID virus, to tell you how important that is to me. And for me to learn it, I'm doing tutorials on AWS. Amazon Web Services. I'm taking the Coursera classes. I'm reading books. There's a book, the first book I read on AI, and it's a little bit geeky. It's called The Master Algorithm, and it starts to go into helping you understand. If you're geeky, that's a great place to start. If you're not, you're just trying to get an understanding, I would just go on YouTube and just, search for AI and just start trying to pick up what you can pick up.
Yeah, I love that.
Long-winded answer, so I apologize.
No, that's great. You just spoke to two subject areas that we have received a lot of questions about: manufacturing and artificial intelligence. Both of those, the sort of sub themes that have come up the most in both of those. With manufacturing, people saying, "Hey, given our changed world, do we expect a lot more manufacturing to come back to the U.S.?" And then with artificial intelligence, people saying, "Hey, specifically as relates to small business, presumably artificial intelligence is going to become more and more important, not just as it has, over the last number of years, but even more so now, given this moment. How can we make that relevant as a smaller business as opposed to, the largest corporations?"
Yeah, you just got to learn it. I mean, it's almost like, with the web again, I'll use that as an example. One day nobody was using the internet. They had no idea what it was. You barely used email. You used PCs for spreadsheets and word processing. And then all of a sudden the internet really became popular and you had to learn how to make it work for your company. Social media, it wasn't natural. Kids were picking it up, but if you weren't into that, then you didn't realize the impact it could have for your business. Now everybody does. AI is going to be the same way. You just got to dig into it and learn what you can and realize that it's going to take some time to learn, but once you get there, it'll give you a competitive advantage.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about leadership. Everybody who's here today is a leader in their respective businesses. And people have very serious questions while they're looking at these really difficult financial trade-offs they have to be making right now. The enormous trade-off that comes with those hard decisions is the human impact of it. And we've received so many questions of people saying, for instance, Larry Tumblin, who works in education at Ohio University, says, "How do we inspire frontline employees to excellence while we make cuts?" That variations of that question come up over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's hard. There's nothing worse. I mean, it's the most painful thing to do. And you just have to be transparent and honest. If you are, then it's still going to be a challenge. But if you then can convey your vision for how you're going to get out of this and the steps necessary to get there, the people that are still employed by you, they're going to want you to succeed. They want their jobs, right? And I'd say that's part one, being honest and showing your vision. But again, I go back to what I said earlier. Incorporating your employees in everything is first and foremost, because your best ideas, look, traditionally you start, for any entrepreneur, you start a company, it's your baby, right? You have this vision, you run it the way you want to run it, you take it directions you want to take it. But this is nothing we've seen before. And so this is an all hands on deck. Get ideas from wherever you can. That's number one. Number two is, I've always given equity to my employees in any company that I've ever started. And when I've sold it, they've done really, really well. And, when we were getting close to selling, they got really, really excited. And for all the multiples of the, 4 or 5 companies I've built and sold, it's turned out very well. And it's been very inspiring for those people. So one of the things that you can do is give your...
Mark, you just went muted.
Did I lose you or am I back?
You're back now. You muted for a second.
Yeah. So again, if I missed it, so part 2, 1 is be honest, transparent. 2, set your vision very clearly and communicate that to your employees. And number 3, give them equity. Just tell them, look, we're in a tough position right now, but I want you to be an owner just like me, and I want us all to be in this together. So I'm going to give you equity. I'm not giving you 75% of the company, but maybe what I've done in the past is I've taken 10 or 20 or 25% of the company and given equity, and based off of their salary and their term of employment, how long have they been there? The exact formula I did was I took the number of months that you've been here times your salary, divided by the total across all employees. So if you make 1,000 and you've been here 10 days or 10 months, that's 10,000 points. Add up all the points and whatever your percentage is, that's the percentage of the equity that I'm giving out that you get. And that's what's worked for me. And then every year you've got to make sure you still have some left. Obviously, you can't give it all away at once, but you also let them vest rather than immediately. You let them vest over 1, 2, 3, or 4 years, depending on your company. And that gives them motivation to stay engaged and really excited about the business.
Yep. Yep. What do you foresee? This is, sorry, from Joe Gardner, who works in travel and hospitality. Do you foresee a permanent decline in business travel and meetings, or a temporary decline until the vaccine is available?
I think it'll be temporary, but not as, we won't get to the same levels we were. You know, we saw a lot of this after 9/11 where people were afraid to fly, and then the TSA came into place and we didn't have, you know, any dramatic problems with flights and people's confidence built up. I think people will still want to go to events and people will still want to travel for business, but they'll be, they won't do it as often. It'll be for bigger events, right? It'll be for more special occasions, as opposed to, oh yeah, I'm just going to go fly and see this customer and spend $6,000 in travel, entertainment, and hotel. I think we'll do more of those via video conference. But if there's going to be a big gathering where you have a bunch of experts or you have a bunch of your customers and everybody's sick and tired of Zooming everything, then those events will be bigger and more special, but we'll go to fewer but more big events.
Yeah. Let me ask you about a few specific industries. We got a lot of questions from people in specific industries wondering, you know, what, sort of like this last question, what you think is going to be sort of the long-term impact. Do you foresee the construction industry for home building to come back and increase quickly?
Yes. I think my personal opinion is we'll design homes a little bit more differently. You know, designing a home in a world where almost everything is delivered and delivered quickly. You know, as an example discussion I had, if you're trying to, if you're buying everything through Amazon or Walmart and all your produce is getting delivered, then do you need as big a kitchen? You know, or if you're buying things that for delivery, do you need as much cooking space? Some people like to cook and will want that, but for more cost-efficient homes, you might reduce that, and so you'll see different types of homes. So that's one area. Number two, I think we've learned some tough lessons in terms of not having affordable housing. So I think you're going to see a trend where people just stand up and say, we've got to change zoning laws in big cities so that we can have denser cities. Now, on one hand, you can argue that created more problems for New York in terms of virus spreading, but at the same time, we need to create lower cost housing. And one of the key reasons for that is if we're going to reduce income inequality, people have got to own assets that appreciate. You know, when everybody just goes to work day by day, hour by hour, and you're living paycheck to paycheck, it's hard, right? And so in order to overcome that, I think we're going to need lower cost housing in urban areas, so it's cheaper to go to work, and that'll give people appreciable assets. So that's a roundabout way of saying, yes, I think construction has an opportunity, but we won't be building houses the same as we did before. And those just construction and engineering and architectural firms that come up with new innovative designs that match America 2.0, those are the ones that will excel and do really well.
Paul Meyer in retail asks, how can retail stores immediately pivot into vastly increased internet sales?
Vastly increased what type of sales?
Internet.
Talk to your customers, figure it out. You know, you're going to have to change your delivery and return. Like I mentioned earlier, that walking into a retail store trying something on is just not going to work anymore. You know, you're going to say, okay, you can't try it on, but you can take it with you. Give me your credit card, and then you can return it later, and you can emulate that in an online environment. I mean, look, you know, I started in the tech industry, and back when I started, you always had to envision yourself competing with Microsoft and even IBM to a certain extent. And then if you got into online, you know, you're selling advertising, you have to compete with Google and Facebook. But now if you're selling anything, you're competing with Amazon. That's just the reality. And you're competing with Walmart. That's just the reality. And you're competing with Target. That's just the reality. So whatever you do online, you're going to have to make sure that you do something for your customers that's different than what they do. Some of the things that I've seen that have worked, automatic return and try privileges, right? We'll send it to you as long as we have your credit card. You try it on, you send it back, we'll disinfect it, we'll send it to other people. Oh my God, space the other one. In any event, you're just going to have to try to be innovative and find new ways to do things that, Amazon and the others just can't do.
Yeah. One of the things everybody's looking at, these difficult circumstances right now, and also realizing there are companies like Zoom who have found new levels of success in this changed environment. A lot of people are looking at that and saying, all right, what are the areas of great opportunity right now and moving forward in what you're calling America 2.0? What do you think about that? What industries are you looking at as, or product opportunities that you're looking at as very interesting moving forward?
Some of the things, services, the picks and shovels for some of the changes that we've discussed. If we're going to open up arenas, we can't do it the same way. If we're going to open up retail direct to consumer, bathrooms are going to have to be different. Air conditioning systems are going to have to be more filtered. How we deal with utensils and condiments are going to have to be completely different. What we do for testing for viruses in the future will have to be different. How do we introduce robotics into that environment? Because we want to have fewer touch points. You don't want to put your hands on everything. You're not going to go places where people have to touch everything first, right? So that's going to lead to the introduction of ambient voice. And so one of the big opportunities, I think, and it's going to be slow, it's not going to happen overnight, is becoming an expert in Amazon Alexa or Google Home or Microsoft Cortana, and introducing that, because lots of people have Alexa, but nobody knows how to write scripts to program it and personalize it. I think that's going to be a big opportunity, and that's going to be introduced into all different kinds of companies. So that why can't you walk into, someplace and just tell a menu or just talk to things and tell them what you want? We will get to that point because that makes the environment safer because there's fewer touch points. Those are, things like, going to a park, right? I'm talking to the local city and municipality health officers. If your grandma or grandpa wants to go to the park, they're not going to feel confident just sitting on a park bench because you don't know who's been sitting there before or what's been there before. Putting together a little phone app or even labels on the park bench to show when the last time it was cleaned, or an app that uses augmented reality and you just point it right at the bench and it then tells you when it was last cleaned and any issues you need to be aware of. Those are things that in America 2.0, where we're trying to be more efficient, travel less, touch fewer things, be cleaner, and better sanitization. Those are the things that I think are going to create opportunities. The one thing you don't want to be is number 101. And what I mean by that is I can't tell you how many emails I get a day. I'm selling masks. Okay, I've got these great sources of masks, or I'm selling this and that, new tests. I've got all these new tests. If everybody's doing the same thing, ask yourself, why do we need one more? Go where they ain't. Come up with things that people aren't doing yet and do them.
So we've received a number of questions along this next thread. I'm going to ask you 3 of them at once, just to, because we're running out of time here. First one comes from Peter Shoemaker, who's a student at UCLA. He says, Mark, at what point does the gap between the competence of our business leaders and that of political leaders become unmanageable? So that's the first question. Second one is Mark Podol of Wireless Ventures asks, can you run for president in 2020? And Jim Seifar asks, what are the 3 things that you would do right now if you were president?
Okay, so number 1, I think there's already a huge gap, and it's not about what business leaders or politicians say. It's about what small business and employees say. This is our country, not theirs, and we're tired of listening to them. And this is exactly what I'd say as president, right? If I did, which is highly unlikely, but if I did. So it's our country, and we have to start supporting people from the bottom up, not the top down. It's great to introduce liquidity into the system, but the reality is that liquidity is not getting to the 22+ million people who are losing their jobs and another 30 million who are underemployed. So we have to come up with programs that go directly to them. Number two, we have to start recognizing that things are changing and investing in things that make America dominant in commerce. The things I mentioned: precision medicine, artificial intelligence, smart buildings, robotics in particular, because we're not going to dominate commerce globally. We're third place in robotics behind Japan, Germany, and China. So we have got to introduce those. We have to be great at those. And I know we can be, because that's what we do. We are the most innovative, creative, resilient country in the world. All top, if you look at the list of the top 50 inventions of the last 50 years, 90% of them would come from the United States of America. We need to make sure that that stays in place. And then you have to look at places where you start creating more revenue. And look, I'm all for paying more taxes, but I would introduce a robotics tax. If we're going to introduce a lot of robotics and we're going to invest in them, they're still going to be cheaper than the way we used to do it. But taxing them 12%, 9% goes into Social Security, 3% goes into investing more in robotics. There's just so many things that you could do, but you've got to understand that we're in a technological world, and more so now. I mean, you're Zooming with your grandma, you're FaceTiming with grandpa, things you never would have envisioned. This is a technological world, but even our top business leaders, to a certain extent, and definitely our politicians from both parties everywhere. This isn't Republican or Democrat. I'd like to get rid of both parties if I could, but they're just not technologically literate, and we need that in leadership right now. So that's my marketing pitch, and that's my campaign pitch, and I'll leave it at that.
Did you answer the second question of those three?
No, I didn't, and that was intentional.
Just for the record, the second question was, are you running in 2020? Well, Mark, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. This is great. I have a feeling we could keep going. We certainly have many, many more questions we could get to, and I know you have answers for them. To everybody who tuned in, thank you so much. We're going to keep covering all of these issues closely at Inc.com. So, please continue to check out the site and find, more advice and help there. And also, we're going to keep having additional events in our Inc. Real Talk series. The next one a week from today, same time, with Paul Mitchell and Patron founder John Paul DeJoria.
I like. And great guy.
He is a great guy, yeah, and a fellow Texan. And
fellow Shark Tank guest too. He was a guest on Shark Tank.
Yeah, there you go. And also check out our weekly Inc. National Small Business Town Hall webinars that we're doing in partnership with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Those are designed specifically to help business owners navigate all the federal loan programs at this moment. Mark, thank you again for joining us. Really appreciate it.
And if anybody has any follow-ups, I can't answer them all, but on Twitter on Twitter, I'm M. Cuban, and on LinkedIn, just put in Mark Cuban and search for me. Follow me there. I try to answer questions there as well.
All right, great. Thank you again. Thanks everybody for coming.
Together. It was awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks.